Welcome to Modern Marketing Messages, the leading podcast discussing the latest and greatest in both online and offline marketing tactics, strategies, and trends. I'm your host, Taylor Karg, marketing content writer at AmericanEagle.com. Today, we're diving into the world of social media content planning. Whether you're a digital marketer, business owner, or simply someone curious about what happens behind the engaging posts and stories you see on a daily basis, this episode is for you. Joining me today are Billadeau and Tracey, two AmericanEagle.com social media specialists. Both are experienced in the world of digital marketing, and they're here to discuss the secrets of crafting an effective social media content plan that not only grabs attention, but also drives results. Thank you so much for joining us today, Morgan and Kelly. I'm really excited to have you guys here and talk about social media.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So before we get into the details, let's take a moment to learn a little bit about, you guys and your expertise here. Morgan, do you want to start with, what you do at AmericanEagle.com and how you ended up working in marketing?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been at AmericanEagle.com for a little over 2 years now. I focus primarily on social media, both the organic and paid side of things. And then I also do a little bit of just our digital marketing strategy here. But I in college, I majored in digital marketing, which is kind of a unique major. I feel like a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah.
It's more typical, just marketing, but I got to do a lot with social media marketing during college. And then I heard about American Eagle and I got to just come here right out of college, which was super awesome. And I've been here for the last 2 years and I feel like I've learned a ton about digital marketing as a whole and also just social media more specifically, which also, as we know, is such an ever-changing industry.
Yeah.
So it's been super cool to continuously learn as I grow here.
And that's awesome that you majored in digital marketing because I feel like, I graduated college in 2017, so 6 years ago now. And I'm like, I don't even remember that really being an option.
Yeah.
So it's got to be fairly new.
Right. I think it is really new. And I think it's just like, it helped me a lot when I was like applying for jobs and coming here to AmericanEagle.com because I was like, oh, I actually learned about this. And I even learned a little bit about like the coding side of websites and stuff. So it was like a really all-encompassing major that I'm super thankful. Like, I know a lot of people are like, I didn't use my college major, but like I actually did.
Well, that's
and
awesome.
I do, which is great. Yeah.
There's always going to be a need for digital marketing now with everything going on. So thank you.
Definitely.
Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Billadeau, as mentioned. Similar to Morgan, I've been at American Eagle for over 2 years now, so pretty crazy to think that time really flew by. But I work on the digital strategy and social media side of things, as well as a little bit of email marketing. So looking at kind of all the different avenues of digital marketing and kind of how that encompasses the overall goals and KPIs we're implementing using digital strategy, but then also social media marketing is definitely where my interests lie. So paid and organic, I think it's just like such a fun room for creativity. And I definitely love that side of digital marketing. But I got into marketing, unlike Morgan, we didn't have digital marketing. It was just marketing at college. But we did have a digital marketing class.
Oh, fun.
And it was like the first year that I was there and it was cool. We actually did get to run like ads for the business school at my college. So that was really interesting just to kind of get hands-on experience. But I think like just even how I've seen the last year, just like marketing just is so digital now. And definitely had an interest in like using the digital space within marketing, but wasn't sure like what avenue. And then my dad had seen one of the American Eagle ads on TV and like recommended, as many people have, and recommended like applying here. So that's kind of how I ended up here.
Well, that's awesome. You two sound like the most perfect people for this episode right now. So I'm excited. Should be a good one. So to start off, I want to set the stage a little bit. And why would people even want to create a social media content calendar in the first place?
Yeah, so I think, as we know, social media is everywhere and there keeps being new platforms all of the time. And I think being on social media is super important for any business at this point, obviously in different like varieties depending on the business. But I think being able to be on social media and kind of having that content calendar and that plan is super important to bring. As Kelly said, like digital marketing is all encompassing and it's so important to make sure that you're utilizing social media. And I think having that plan and understanding your audience through that plan is super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's like a really good balance of being able to be kind of spontaneous with things with social media marketing. I think like definitely compared to some of the other forms, it's very quick and a lot of like room for things to quickly change. So you want to make sure not only like are you being part of the conversation and staying up to date and staying relevant, but I think also with the content calendar, just kind of from my experience, and I feel like Morgan, you've probably experienced this too. Sometimes like it takes more than like the time that you allocate to like pull together the graphics, pull together the copy, so like having that content calendar and really knowing like where your priorities lie allow you to kind of be strategic with all the like resources gathering and knowing like how you want to plan for the upcoming month or couple months ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super important to just help you stay organized and figure out like
definitely.
what you want to do and what kind of posts you want to make and which channels. So completely understand. So I broke all of the questions down into 6 different segments, which, encompass 6 different areas that we're going to talk about today. So the first segment I want to talk about is understanding the audience. What are the first steps to take when starting to build a social media content plan?
I think the first step is really those initial conversations with clients of who is your target audience and understanding kind of like what that target audience's behaviors are online, because it can be very different depending on the industry, the age targeting, how they interact with social media, what kind of content resonates with them. So I think those conversations are super important just in the beginning to kind of know like first who is our target audience and how to identify them. And I think there's a really great amount of like resources out there with like social media platforms and management tools of like reporting like here are the different audiences, here are some of the breakdowns of like trends we're seeing and the times that they're posting and things like that, or interacting, liking things. So getting a good understanding of that just really helps you kind of to build that foundation for your target audience before even like starting the content calendar. So I'd say that's the first step there.
Yeah, with that, just to add on, I would additionally say like looking at competitors and where competitors are, what platforms are they on, how are they utilizing social media, and then looking at your own client and saying, okay, does that match what our audience and align with what we're trying to do and what we're kind of strategizing as far as what social platforms to be on?
Yeah, that's awesome. And my next question, actually, which I think both of you answered individually too, so I want to see if there's anything else. So you talked about competitor research and analysis, and you've talked about, like other resources that, like social media planning platforms and that kind of stuff. What type of techniques do you guys follow when you're trying to understand a client's, say it's like a new client, what techniques do you follow to understand their target audience and their, I guess, competitors as well? What do you guys do to kind of learn more about them?
I think an initial audit is kind of like a really good foundational point that we try to instill with all of like starting a new client, getting the ground up and running. But to Morgan's point, I think like that competitor analysis within that initial audit is super helpful because not every client is going to be fit for every platform, and like certain target audiences are going to be on some platforms versus others. And so I would say that's like a really good place to start. And then just like that initial audit of like trying to understand the current presence of a client and what does that look like in terms of who's currently engaging, who's currently commenting, things like that. And does that align with who they've listed as their target audience? And if not, like where is that gap lying? And can we find that within like competitors within the market?
I'd also say, just like add on to that, I like to pull myself out of like the kind of client for a second and like look at it from the outside looking in, just because obviously I'm not going to be every one of my clients' potential audience. So I like to, see whether it's in the like my real outside of work life or within my coworkers. Does someone that, I know fit that kind of target audience? Can I talk to them, see, especially for social media, what platforms are they using day to day? And just thinking about it, because at the end of the day, the potential audiences are real people. They're, just everyday people. So how can we like really think about who they are and where online they are?
So is like a social media audit and a competitor analysis, is that kind of part of you guys' routine when signing out a new client, or do both of those things on a regular basis for existing clients? Say, like, do you do them like once a quarter? Or do you kind of know? If you do it one time, you kind of know.
I'd say that the initial kind of organic social media audit is definitely something we do as we're onboarding new clients.
Mhm.
Sometimes we do it with clients who maybe are current clients, but we're not really focusing on social media.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
go through the audit. A lot of that is kind of just understanding their basic audience targeting, making sure that, their images are clear on their profiles and things like that. So it's typically not something we need to do multiple times. But I think we will kind of after a year, even 6 months, a quarter, we'll relook at the organic social media and say, based on our audit, is this working? Do we need to kind of go back to maybe some ideas in the audit that didn't come to fruition? Or do we need to almost do not another audit, but just kind of another like analysis of what's working and what's not?
Yep, I got you. So how do you guys use the information that you've learned during, this entire process and your audience understanding to create content that resonates with the customer's target audience?
Yeah. Within that initial audit, we really like to kind of build out content themes. And I think that's where understanding your audience really comes into play because there are just like certain trends or themes we see within different platforms or just different target audiences that resonate better. And I think that gives us like a really good foundation for, okay, what is kind of our plan to really get that messaging across instead of just like, well, we have your target market, but we don't know like how to actually reach them and with content. So I think that's definitely something that comes really like to fruition after having those audits. And then also kind of as Morgan touched on, just like making sure their profile is up to par and kind of like following best practices, whether it be like the profile picture or even just like the description, the about us section. If that's not super clear right off the bat, then you may be missing out on audiences who kind of like assume something different from your brand.
Right,
like
yeah.
sometimes it could be like I have a client that's like a commercial HVAC client, so they're very like B2B. And so making sure that like within that description that's super clear. It's not like they're coming into your house. They're looking more like those sky or like the high rises and things like that. So that's just like one example of making sure like all your profile right off the gate has all of that important information.
Yeah, for sure. And can you give an example of what a content theme would be?
One that I really like is engagement focus. So those are what are different ways, and I think with each brand, again, it's like so diverse of what would kind of get users to interact. But so an engagement focus theme would kind of have like the initial or like the goal of it to be to get users to either like comment or reshare or like repost to their stories. And so with each different client, there's different opportunities. Like what's a question or like what's a type of content that would really get users like excited to interact with it. So
right.
I definitely enjoy that content theme.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun one. So moving on to the second segment of questions, and this one's about setting goals and objectives. How do you determine the goals and objectives of a social media content plan?
So I like to always like ask my client, what exactly do you want to get out of social media? Obviously, we can give them all of the ideas, the different themes and things like that. But what's our goal with social? And even with similar clients within a similar industry, they may have different goals. It might be to just get them to the site. It might be for them to, call or sign up for something. So I always like to see what is their goal. And that helps me align exactly what do I want my content themes to be based on the goal. And I think having your client having an understanding of what their goal of social media is really helpful. And that also can vary from platform to platform. The goal of Twitter or X is going to be very different.
I will always call it Twitter.
I know. I'm like, do I have to say Twitter now? Or do I have to say X now? I'm not sure. But something like Twitter, you might have different goals than you're going to have on LinkedIn, and understanding those goals and also being aligned with your client on those different goals, I think is really important for the success of the content calendar of the content on social media.
And you kind of touched on this before, but with like signing up for something or even, commenting on a post, what are the KPIs that should be considered what are some examples of common KPIs that you guys see with your customers?
Yeah, across the board for all social, I would say like reactions and engagements are definitely the biggest. So I think it's important to look not only at like the overall likes, but also like the comments themselves. So if you're getting a bunch of likes, but no one's actually like commenting, then what is it about the post that maybe users don't feel like they want to actually interact with?
Yeah.
Or why are they just like mindlessly scrolling? Another kind of example of that is like videos. So we may be seeing like video views as like these platforms really prioritize short form video, but maybe not likes on the video. So it's kind of like, where is that kind of gap of getting users to actually interact and engage with the post there? We also use analytics from the website perspective as well. And I think that gives a really good sign into how are users taking action based off of kind of that intended goal of the post. So once they click on a link or on like a ad or something like that, where are they landing and what are they doing once they're on the website? Because like another metric, and now with the GA4 updates, a little different, but it used to be bounce rate. So if users are clicking on the link, but then leaving the website, again, whereas like that discrepancy of like the social post versus like them actually taking that next step on the website itself.
So when you say you guys look at the analytics, is it a lot of it from like Google Analytics 4 now, and you take a look with the rest of your team and try to make, fair assumptions in there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is from GA4. I think also depending on the client, some clients use content scheduling platforms, something like Sprout Social, and that will pull in a lot of really fabulous analytics. Unfortunately, not everyone has that, but clients who have that.
I didn't know Sprout Social gives you analytics.
Yeah, they give you some really good metrics that are really helpful for QBRs or just, reporting. So that's another, and multiple platforms do that, even within something like Meta. They give you some metrics, not everything, but it's nice because you can kind of pull from a couple different areas to get kind of a well-rounded picture of how social is performing.
Gotcha. So earlier we talked about like engagement as a content theme. How do you guys strike a balance between, engagement or brand awareness or lead generation or any other content themes or just objectives in the content plan?
That's a really good question, just because I feel like with some clients, they think that social is so like, here are services. And it's like that. And that's a content theme we usually will like do too, is like brand focused or about us. But they forget that like social media is not always just users looking to buy things. Sometimes it is just building brand awareness or branding the brand personality. So I think that's a conversation I've had to have with a lot of clients, and it's definitely not always the easiest one of like finding that balance, exactly like you mentioned. So we like to do usually around 5 to 6 different content themes within those initial audits. And that kind of ties into like the value of a content calendar is when you're creating the calendar, how are you kind of balancing the different themes? If it's just like sell, here's about our brand, like users are not going to resonate with that. You're going to notice like content fatigue and engagement fatigue. So I think that just like emphasizes the value of having a content calendar, because it can be tough to like make sure that you're rotating through all the different themes while also getting like your overall brand goals and KPIs aligned with the content you're putting out there.
I think also making sure after, a couple months you're analyzing what's working, what's not. And that's why the QBRs are really helpful, because it allows you to take a step back and look at, every client's audience and followers are different. So even if they're in the exact same industry, they're going to have different kind of actions and prefer different types of posts. So I think looking at those and saying, one client in particular who their followers love and really react well to kind of what's going on with the company, their company outings, their trainings, things like that, those perform 100 times better than their service posts. And I think it's important to know that maybe social media is not the place to push their services. Maybe it is a little bit more fun, more engaging. And so just understanding, I think, their audience, and for us as the social team, taking a step back and looking at their analytics and just what's performing well, I think that's also really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not to vouch for Sprout Social
No.
again, but they have a really cool feature where you can label the different posts. So that's kind of similar to like the content themes. And
Oh, nice.
I think that's a great point, Morgan, of like actually seeing how the content's performing, because it's not always necessarily what you think on that initial audit. But I found a lot of value in like at the end of every month, like you can actually break down the different like labels of the post that went out and see like which performed the best. And it's like, oh, this type of content is not performing well. How can we switch it up or like rework the captions and the copy for all of it?
Awesome. That's great advice. And speaking of Sprout Social, we're going to move on to the next segment, which is all about selecting the right platforms. And with so many social media platforms available, how do you decide which ones are the best fit for your content plan?
I think that goes back to what's the goal of social media for the client. It's going to be different. I think now sometimes clients and just people in general think, oh, we got to be on every platform when that isn't necessarily the case. And I think it also goes back to kind of what's your brand voice. I know a lot of law firms, nursing homes, they're on TikTok now. That could be the right decision. That also
hilarious.
Oh, yeah. It also could be the wrong decision. And it kind of just goes back to what's your brand voice? How do you want to appear on the internet? Because if you are going to be silly on TikTok, I think then you can't be super serious on Facebook. It needs to connect.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where it's kind of like that discussion with the client. Sometimes they even come to us, they have every platform and they're like, should we be on all of these platforms? And not necessarily. So I don't know if that really answers what platforms or how to decide, but I think it is so client to client, and it is just what's the goal of social media.
And it seems like if you did have, an account on every platform and you're trying to keep up with it, it just seems really difficult and like time consuming. And I feel like something is bound to fall through the wayside if you're trying to be great on every platform.
And I think the like problem that can occur from that is you like don't have enough time to really tailor it to each platform, because that's another like huge thing we try to like bring across to clients is like there are best practices and like ways of writing the different captions and the different like graphics and things like that for each platform. So if you're just posting like the same thing across all platforms just to be put out there, like you are gonna like not resonate with your target audience across all those platforms because it's just not following best practices and kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned TikTok earlier, and I'm just curious. Now, obviously, with TikTok being, the number one platform around the world and its increasing popularity, have you guys noticed within, the last year and a half that more and more customers are mentioning TikTok like on their kickoff calls or want to? And have you guys been developing these TikTok strategies?
Yeah, I think TikTok's so interesting because things trend so quickly for such a short amount of time. Sometimes you can't have that in a content calendar because you don't know.
It's here one day and gone the next.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of clients are coming to us and they're asking, how can we be on TikTok, and does it make sense, and how would it make sense for us to be on TikTok, which is interesting. And I think what I've seen a lot of success with is doing some, more brand awareness posts scheduled into the content calendar. But then, I'm chronically online, so I'm always on TikTok in my free time when I'm not at work. So if I see a TikTok that makes sense for one of my clients, sending it to myself and then sharing it with the client to see if we can kind of replicate something like that in a quick, unfortunately, 24 hours kind of turnaround time. Because as we all know, if you wait too long, then the trend's not relevant anymore. So I think it's kind of having a balance of planned content, but then also that kind of like on the fly content.
Yeah. And I think like sounds too is another thing where like some clients are really particular of like the sounds they want to use or like the different graphics or videos. And like if you want to be on TikTok and be like part of that conversation, you do just like have to have that quick turnaround. So I think everyone gets like super excited, like we want to be on TikTok because like everyone's on TikTok. But again, it's like, is it really worth like the time and the resources if you're not going to be like really posting content that users like will engage in and like will resonate with your audience?
Awesome. And we talked about this a little bit on my previous question, not the TikTok one, but so how do you guys adapt to suit different platforms while still maintaining the consistent like brand identity? Say, like you said, you have to tailor each, piece of content. If it's a post on Facebook or, a short video? How do you guys adapt to that for specific brands?
Yeah, I think it's tough with the digital space constantly changing. So I think even before tailoring them, like being the best advocate of like researching for best practices. So like attending webinars or just like articles even on LinkedIn of like knowing different trends. Like for example, with LinkedIn or with Instagram, now like you can have multiple links within your bio, and that's like an update within the last month. So like swapping.
Was it just one before?
Yeah, it was just one before. Yeah, it's like you come to work and every
like
day.
Third party,
like
link
a
in
link tree
bio
or something.
Yeah, but now it's in the platform.
Now it can be in the platform. And so it's like tailoring your captions for Instagram. It's like click the link in the bio. For Facebook, you can have the link already like within the caption. Even like the number of hashtags, understanding like what hashtags perform better on platforms, because with LinkedIn, we do recommend having hashtags on posts.
Okay.
But you're not going to be using like hashtag grill season where you would like on like Instagram or TikTok or anything like that. So it is like just doing your research before actually even writing the captions to know like what performs best. And I think short form video is something we're seeing again just like across all the platforms, but also being strategic about that, because what's on trending on TikTok isn't always necessarily what's trending on Instagram too. So
yeah,
it's, again, just researching it, staying up with the trends.
And I feel like that's probably, difficult with, trying to get all of the work done, build a content calendar, do the posting, and stay up on top of trends seems like a lot of time.
Yep, it is.
So moving on to segment 4, this is all about creating content themes and pillars. How do you approach creating content themes that align with your brand and resonate with the audience?
I think this goes back to what I've said multiple times. So one, understanding your audience, but then also looking at your competitors, and then also looking at when your client comes to you, what are they currently doing? And then what's working and what's not, and how can we build off of that? As Kelly mentioned, themes and pillars that are super engaging. But if our client's currently doing a lot of engagement posts and they're not performing well, like do we need to realign those, or do we need to maybe try something else? And I think again, also just every couple months or so, looking at what's working, what's not, and then adjusting as needed. Also, it could be your client's following is changing, but it also could be the social media platform itself is changing. Right. And so staying up to date on what's going to work best there.
Do you guys have any examples of successful content themes or pillars used by brands on social media? They could either be our customers, we won't have to say their names, or just any brands that you guys like outside of AmericanEagle.com.
So one that like immediately comes to mind for me, because it was such a successful kind of theme and pillar that we kind of then included ongoing for one of our clients, is highlighting on LinkedIn employee anniversaries, but then also tying that back to open positions that the company had. And we saw a ton of success and a ton of engagement with this, because obviously if it's your anniversary with a company, you're probably going to share it on LinkedIn, your friends, family, they're going to comment that. So it's going to reach a ton of new people. Also, we always know like being able to work for a company when you know someone that works for it. Right. That's always something comfortable when looking for a new job. So I think something like that is also really valuable. And so that was just like one example that kind of including the engagement side of things, but then also looking at the
human connection
of the business, tying those together and then sharing, we have job opportunities. That was something that like was just, we saw such an increase within those LinkedIn posts for this client. And so that was one engagement kind of all meshed together theme that worked really well for us.
That's interesting. I like that idea. I was like, maybe I should tell our social person.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. You guys should, like, it was that, I don't have the exact number, but it was like a 500% increase compared to other posts. Yeah. And then every time we did a post, if it was, I think it was like monthly, sharing the anniversaries for this client, those posts, phenomenal.
Oh, interesting. Huh. How about you? Do you have any stories, Kelly?
I have one client in particular that it's, I guess I would say they have a lot of like adventure activities
Oh.
associated. Like it's a physical
Fun.
location. And they already had a decent like following on all their social platforms. And they've like been around for a while. So they definitely like have a fan base. And the like content themes that resonated the most were just kind of like highlights of either users. So like user generated content, actually like at the parks doing different activities. I think a lot of people like resonated with the nostalgia of it and like really getting to see the firsthand experience. And then also just like any pictures, even like from more of a brand side of the different activities that you can do while you're there. Cause I think a lot of people that have experienced it or were hoping to, like they just have like beautiful like visuals associated like with some of like their activities and like events. And so we saw like a lot of engagement there of users commenting like, oh, I've done this before, like it's on my list, or like this is a great scenery or something. So that was a unique one. So kind of like balancing it of the user generated content side, but then also even like just from like the brand side of things, like highlighting some of like their favorite parts like of their business.
Oh, that sounds great. So moving on to the fifth segment, this is all about planning and scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
What tools or methods do you recommend for organizing and scheduling social media content effectively? And I feel like this is where our free Sprout Social app
it is. I wish every client was on Sprout personally.
It's tricky with the platforms too, because for some of them, you can schedule ahead. I guess all now, mostly you can. I remember LinkedIn just switched like a couple months ago, and it was like the best thing to wake up to. Like I was like messaging everyone like, guys, you can schedule stuff out on LinkedIn now.
That's wild, because you would think that LinkedIn would have had that capability
would have
so
been
long
one
ago.
of the first. Yeah. And like it actually was such a pain. So for them to switch, like it made a huge difference. And I think first we do like to start with just building out the calendar. Like we usually use like Smartsheet, which is just like more of like a fun Excel essentially, where you can like lay it out, have all the dates, show you all the different themes, and kind of like plan out the content there. But then actually going into the platforms if they don't have Sprout, which is always sad, but because you have to go to each individual platform and schedule it out beyond there. So I think Instagram and Facebook, you can do that for in-feed and for stories, as well as LinkedIn. And then Twitter, you also can. Pinterest, you can schedule a little bit out, but some of them too, you can only schedule out like a certain amount of time in advance. So I know for Facebook, it's like 28 days. So if there's ever a month where I'm just like really ahead of it and I'm like, I'm ready to just like plan out September and be done. It's like, no, like you can plan out till like half of September, which is like frustrating. So I would say like obviously Sprout's the number one. There's also Hootsuite as another one.
Hootsuite, yeah, that's one I was thinking about.
Yeah, that's another great one. I think it's like a lot of clients have talked about that. Or Zoho Social is another one.
Oh, I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, it's interesting one. I only had one client on it, but it had a lot of the capabilities of all the different platforms too. So ideally, if you can have it all living in one place, that is nice compared to like scheduling out all on the different platforms. But it's kind of just like knowing what's available to you.
So how far in advance do you guys try to plan content for your customers? I know obviously sometimes you can't post it, within 28 days, but what's the cycle of you guys planning each customer's content?
I think it does kind of vary client to client, depending on also how far out they've planned their marketing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's largely dependent on them too.
I have one client who I already finished October this week.
Whoa.
So that's kind of weird.
Look
I was doing Halloween content, but that's just how far in advance they planned out their marketing and they want it. Typically, I'd say we're working a month in advance, though, having it kind of halfway through the month prior to the month you need it scheduled for, if that makes sense. So right now, since we're halfway through August, we're working on September content.
Yeah.
So that way our clients have time to review it as well and give any feedback or comments before we actually schedule it out.
Right. Do you guys have any tips for maintaining a content calendar and avoiding content fatigue?
So one thing I like to do when starting a content calendar, and it's like kind of cheesy, but for like each month is like looking at the different holidays for the upcoming month. I know like we have all talked about doing that and finding like different themes that like tie back to your business or can tie back to like some engagement, but like still kind of being relevant, because I think definitely with content fatigue, that's really the value of like the content themes, is making sure you are rotating it,
Right.
And switching it throughout, but then also like having that balance of like being a part of the conversation that's happening during that month or like within the industry. So it definitely gets tricky. And I think that's, again, where analytics comes into play, where like even the content we were putting out a year ago at this time, like what worked in September may in 2022 may not be working in September 2023. So I think with social media, it's just like constantly revisiting your strategy. But also, again, like back to the holidays, like also like trying to be a part of whatever the conversation is and keeping it like as fresh and up to date as possible.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I would say one piece of advice that my manager gave me that was really good advice is just try to add one new thing each month.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of times I want to add, all these new ideas, but there's just not the time in a day.
Yeah. And you also have to, get client approval.
Right.
And,
Exactly. But can you add one new thing? Maybe you haven't been posting reels and you can start incorporating those, or you can try a new type of engagement post. It doesn't have to be anything big, but just continuously brainstorming new ideas. And I think with social media, especially, I know I'm on it a lot, as I mentioned, in my free time. So just when I see things that could be applicable to my clients, making sure I save that. So when it comes time for a new content calendar, I can determine how I can incorporate that into my own client's calendar. Just again, always adding like a little something new.
Yeah. That's cool. And I totally agree with that. And the beauty of social media is that I feel like there's always going to be new stuff too.
Right.
And, especially at a company like AmericanEagle.com, there's ways and different customers to flex, the new stuff that you've learned.
Definitely. And on the flip side of that too, like you don't want to do too much at once. Like sometimes brands will get excited and say like, here are like 5 new posts we want to put out there, but like you don't want to totally throw your audience for a spiral. So I think like the one idea per month is great, because you can kind of like slowly dip your toes into the water instead of just like doing everything like totally new. And yeah.
That's great advice. So moving on to the 6th and final segment, and this is all about measuring and analyzing results. How do you evaluate the success of your social media content, let's say on a monthly basis?
The platforms themselves have a good like foundation in terms of analytics. So I would say that's usually the first place to start, is just at the end of each month kind of looking. And I know a lot of them do like comparative metrics. So looking at like this month versus the last month and kind of seeing that breakdown of what were the different posts we put out. And did we see like a significant difference? Did we see a decline? Did we see an increase? And maybe what's changed or what do we do differently? I also really like to look at like for the month, what were the different posts, and then kind of like see from there which were the top performing. And that speaks again to those content themes and just the like content overall. So like what did perform the best in terms of like different content themes? Are we seeing this trend month over month? So I'd say that's the first place to start, is like within the platforms themselves. And then like, of course, analytics too. If we saw like a huge jump in website visits from social this month, like what was different, what wasn't different. I hate to say Sprout again, but Sprout has a really awesome tool that allows you to like compare your metrics with your competitors that I really like, because for the month you can see like where you ranked in terms of like your top 10 competitors and like what those different KPIs were and like how you measure up. So that's like just, again, another shout out to Sprout.
Yeah, that's an incredible tool.
It's really cool. That's like one of my favorite, because obviously you want to make sure like for your KPIs of your client, like you're hitting those and kind of knowing where you stand, but also like where are you standing within the industry as well.
And Morgan, you mentioned a few times QBRs. Can you explain kind of what you guys go over with your customers in the QBRs?
Yeah, so within the QBRs, I think one thing I always like to pull beyond just, the engagement, the likes, the reach for each platform is I like to look at the top performing posts. So I typically pull the top 3 performing posts and then the bottom 3 performing posts and look at what was the post. Was it a video? Was it a static image? Was it a long caption, a short caption? And kind of put the 3 side by side. I think that's a really nice visual within the QBRs for the client to see what's successful. Obviously, numbers are great, but sometimes they're a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think seeing the post and then seeing, this had the highest reach, I think that's really helpful with those QBRs, and doing them a couple times a year just helps you, again, realign with your social goals and with kind of what's working and what's not, especially as social's always changing.
Yeah, that's great to go back and look at everything too. And you mentioned earlier about, the employee anniversaries with the like open positions postings. Can you guys think of any other stories that you've seen, like, dramatic positive increases based on specific like social media posts or platforms that you guys have done?
Yeah.
No, if you want to go ahead, you're good.
I will say giveaways always tend to do
definitely.
phenomenal. Typically, especially if, it's something where you have to comment and tag someone else, that's expanding your reach a ton. Typically, you have to like the post. Maybe you have to share it to your story or something like that. So those obviously are going to bring a ton of engagement. And typically, they're very low cost for the client. It doesn't have to be a big giveaway gift, but it helps just really grow your social. And I think it's just, you typically do see a pretty big spike in engagement with those type of posts.
Oh, awesome.
And one tip for those that someone on our team gave us that I noticed a difference just even in the giveaways we had run previously is actually writing giveaway on the graphic itself, because a lot of people will just be mindlessly scrolling and not read the captions. So if you have that right off the bat, like we saw a significant jump in interactions. And then the other type of like content that I'm like the biggest advocate for is user generated content. So that's when a brand is tagged, but it's from like a user or an audience member on the platform.
Yeah.
So I have a client that I kind of mentioned them earlier, but they're a food company. And so during grilling season and like the summer months, they get tagged in so much user generated content.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
And that's just like a huge, like summer is such a big time for growth for them on social, because it's like people that are tagging them and their followers who may not be familiar with the brand themselves. And that also allows the brand to repurpose that content and reuse it and be part of these bigger conversations. And I think with social, we're just seeing like a movement to be more authentic and not necessarily be so salesy and be so pushy right now. And so that content just across the board, I'm always pushing clients for, you can get that from users, and giveaways are honestly a great way to do that. Like tag us in this post and like, then you can reuse it. And that also like allows you to have graphics kind of within your backlog and content to repurpose as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like that even just pushes, like customer loyalty and that kind of stuff, because you're thinking about the brands that I like. And I'm like, if I tag them in my Instagram story and then they reposted it, I'd be like, oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have one last question for the both of you today. And what is your top 2 takeaways, each of you, for listeners to walk away with from this episode as it relates to creating their social media content plans?
Yeah, so I'll say my top 2 takeaways. The first one being just understanding your audience and the goal of your social media, kind of those 2 hand in hand, I think are just so important. You can have the coolest graphics, the best captions, but if they don't align with your audience and if they don't align with your company goals and your goals for social media, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And I think that's just super important, a big picture with content calendars.
Awesome.
I would say for me, the first one is like just doing your research. So we kind of mentioned just like the variability with the different platforms, the different audiences and best practices, and digital marketing and social media marketing, as we've said, just like constantly changing. So like knowing what you're doing and like understanding the purpose behind it. And then also the value of planning. Just like within the content calendars, you don't want to be scrambling at the end of the month or like to get things turned around. So having that balance of like, yes, being ready to kind of like move at a moment's notice, but also like having a plan of your overall strategy in advance.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. I learned a lot. I know our listeners are going to learn a lot, and I'm excited for this to come out. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
Taylor.
having us.
Thank you for listening to Modern Marketing Messages. For more information about the topics discussed today, check out the description of this episode. And if you like this episode, follow the podcast wherever you listen to them to stay up to date with us. While you're at it, give us a rating and share this podcast with others. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Modern Marketing Messages. This episode is brought to you by AmericanEagle.com Studios. I'm Taylor Karg, and I'll be back with another Modern Marketing Message.